whether it's that we have other priorities in the country, because whenever, like as designers, sometimes we are told this, whenever we're talking with someone who is not in the design field, who's maybe in another field, they'd be like, this is not important, we have other priorities to focus on. So is it, for example, legislation, the lack of legislations and policies, is it that we are busy with other priorities considering the crisis that we're in? Is it the lack of awareness and education, or the lack of variety of materials and resources, or perhaps as well applying design thinking in the government? So you can also share your thoughts with regards to this. Now moving to our next section, which is about sustainability versus political power. We know that governments somehow tend to move at their own pace until, like whether it's slow or a bit, let's say it's a slow pace, until they are pushed by a larger or more urgent voice from us, the people. So I'd like to ask you, do you think that design is still used to facilitate power imbalances? It's complicated, Karim. Okay. When it comes to like political power imbalances, do you think design is used to facilitate it or not? Is there a role for design when it comes to the balance of...
It should resist.
Yeah, okay. I'm asking that.
It should resist. I mean, if design can help in raising awareness on the pressing issues and pushes the voter to vote differently the next time, then there is a certain level of success. The bottom line, when you talk about governments which don't have the right priorities, is that if you live in a democracy, which is most of our situations, you have the power to choose who's going to represent you. So that's, for me, the bottom line. The bottom line is, are people voting out of awareness, or are people voting out of other priorities? Like, for example, corruption. You know, I give you $100, would you vote for me? Unfortunately, it's still very much the case in third world countries like ours. In other countries, there's a lot of convolution around democracy. If I talk about developed countries like, I don't know, European countries or the United States, and still it is not giving the result, which is that for ecological concerns to become the top priority. It has not yet happened. So I would say raising awareness through design or through talking or through activism or through anything is a must to be able to push better voting next time anywhere in the world.
Yeah, to complete that, I think, I mean, also the way, I mean, we're educators, and we do have a lot of influence on people that join firms in design and join us in doing some work together, and there's a lot of people that in this collaborative process, which is design, develop themselves and decide what the values that they want to follow are. And the important thing in design is that in every profession that we do, whatever, if it's design or other things, we need to actually make sure that our values are actually taking into consideration the fact that we want to educate people to be civically engaged, to care about the country they're in, to care about the land they are at, to care about the planet as well, to care about all these kind of important aspects that will make sure that we can actually survive and meet the next generation and be there. So through design, I mean, for example, in Design for Communities, what we do, we have an educational program, which is also based in AUB, where we can join different people from different universities to actually think together on what kind of projects they can build in architecture, but that are actually serving the public good and serving communities. And that's where their thoughts are different, because they think instead of building a tower, in, I don't know, another country in the Gulf area or whatever, I really need to think, so my intervention here will help people and will support people and local communities, particularly that are around me, in designing something that is for them, but at the same time thinks sustainable in terms of environment, in terms of social, in terms of economy and all that. And that's where, when they do it, when they actually build the projects with their own hands, when they learn by doing, they will become obviously educated in this value that we want them to learn, which is how can you serve your community through the projects that you do, through your profession. We don't want you to become a social worker or something that is related to only social work when you're still studying. We want you to actually become in your profession someone that cares about whoever is around you, the communities around you, the environment around you, the society around you. And that's where they will inspire others, because when they leave, they know, they have this value in their mind now. They know that whatever they do, even if it's a tower, it needs to respond to the context. It needs to actually work for the people that will live there. It needs to also address the people that are surrounding it.
So it's kind of like shifting our attitude towards business from business simply for a personal goal and generating profit for a few people, versus business that's impacting the world.
With a social impact.
With exactly.
So it can be profitable still, but it needs to have a social impact.
That's exactly it, designed for communities, yeah. Philippa, you wanted to add something?
What I wanted to say is that I believe that we are political beings as humans, which means that the notion of politics is not exclusive to a particular class, but we do actively practice it in our daily life, in our choices, in the way we do things. And so design becomes a tool that we have, us as designers, and each person has a different tool within this dynamic. And so our role as designers is not particularly to create this change, but to work on it, to communicate it, either be it in graphic design or in the visual communication field or in other fields as well. So it's a communal contribution of everyone in our practices of our daily lives in order to produce this world or this state we believe should be.
Yeah. Political beings, can you redefine this? What do you mean by it?
I
As
mean
by
that
choice? The choices that we make?
I mean that we are born as citizens, as we're not just born as humans, we are humans of course, but we're also citizens, parts of many other categories and many other labels that we have. In a sense where it's not a limitation to our presence in life, but more of a duty that we have towards the others, to the community in which we live. And so in this sense, our choices of, for example, either buying from a local product or buying imported products, this is a political decision that we make. While it's not a type of legislation that we are imposing, but it's also a choice that we do take. Taking particular streets, roads, cars, we use public transportation. All of these are part of the political choices that we make.
Right, and does this contradict, Karim, what you were explaining earlier with regards to the boundaries of countries and globalization in that respect?
No, it doesn't contradict, because basically local means close. It doesn't mean necessarily Lebanese. Until we are able to live in one planet where there are no nationalities, you know John Lennon? Until we are able to achieve that, there will still be names and tags and labels, which are fun in a way, you know. There's a certain pleasure also at calling yourself something. I don't have an issue with it. It's just that when I insist in buying a pair of shoes that comes from the other side of the world, that I pay 5 times the amount or 10 times the amount simply because it has a brand on it, this type of thinking can evolve for sure, and it is evolving. I mean, I see it in the new generations. There's much more understanding of the significance of meaning and of content rather than surface and appearance. This has definitely started to happen. I mean, my nephews are in their 20s, I'm in my 40s. I can see that. So there is hope for sure.
Yeah. So I'd like to move a bit the talk to discuss more the impact of political power on the design trends. And Sara, I'd like to ask you, you know, sometimes when a country is politically more powerful, somehow everything that trends in this country is somehow adopted elsewhere in the world. And knowing that we are a small country with a small land ratio, do you think that we are following some sustainability design trends in Lebanon? If we are, is there a specific trend we're following? Is there a specific country that we are following? And is it actually wrong to follow? Or should we create our own sustainable practices in Lebanon?
Is it wrong to follow or not? I mean, that's up to every person to think critically and to understand also where they want to be. But at the end, we do need to agree. I mean, so what do we, is it a need? Is it solving a problem? Whatever we're looking at, is it really something that we need, or is it something that is there and that we just want to copy and implement without thinking? So that's why when we talk about following trends, I mean, obviously there is the trend we've been talking about, globalization. There are trends that are everywhere. But sometimes it's coming from a country, sometimes it's coming also from economic power, sometimes it's coming from the UN. If I take, for example, the Sustainable Development Goals that we're all familiar with. I mean, the Agenda 2030 of the UN is something everyone is following around the world in some way. I can tell you from the example of scouting, we're 57 million scouts in the world, in 172 countries, but at the same time, we do follow the agenda of Sustainable Development Goals. Now, did it change what we're doing? No. We're just labeling what we do and putting it in one collective effort to make sure that we're actually achieving this and contributing to this global agenda, which is about sustainable cities and communities, which is about reducing inequalities, which is about gender balance. No one disagrees with those goals. It's how we implement them, which should be local, and how we do it at a local level. So we can think global, we can use what's there, we can research and see what's there and understand what's there. But at the end, when we grasp it, so we see it, and then we say, so how can I implement this? How can I do it in my local culture? How can I do it in Lebanon? And is it actually helping me in solving a problem? If I don't have any poverty, why would I actually contribute to this agenda? I do it if I really feel that there is a need to actually address this issue. And that's where we will actually look at how we can, as designers, take the lead in actually contributing to this, learning from what's there. There's no point of repeating and duplicating all the efforts. We are connected, we can actually use that. But then how can we actually leverage what we do and implement it in a way while looking, for example, at vernacular architecture? And I can tell you again an example of a project where we really thought of, for example, a learning space in a makeshift school for refugees in the Bekaa. And what we did is, instead of creating a completely new structure that is made of materials that are from all over the world, we just chose to use local materials and also a very simple and low-tech way of achieving sustainability and a space that is comfortable for students and refugees that were there. And what we used sandbags, we used an earth duct that would channel the wind for 40 meters to get into the space and actually ventilate the space. And that's where we have a space which is very functional. But also, I mean, is it using the trends that are in the world? No. I mean, is it using the materials that are in the world? No. Is it responding to the same needs? Yes. I mean, we are creating a space which is sustainable and comfortable and visually comfortable for students as well.
Yes, but do you see that we always reach the bottom and then we try to look for solutions? Like, for example, now with the electricity problem, suddenly now you look at buildings, everyone installed solar panels. Like, we could have done it way before, but what do you think stops us from adopting sustainable changes, like practices, before reaching the bottom? Like before the crisis really hits.
Because we need to label it as a need. Exactly. I mean, that's what we're missing. We're missing our chance. We're designers, we're visionaries. We should think forward. We shouldn't think only on responding to now. So our responsibility is to take the lead and see that eventually we need actually solar panels to be able to generate energy, then let's do that. Let's actually create this need from before and make sure we don't get to a point where we have random solar panels and PV panels that are all over the country on all the roofs of the buildings.
Visual
and they're not visually appealing, but also they're not properly functioning properly as well. So I mean, we could actually have catered for this and thought of this and actually made it responsibly there, and also economically feasible maybe if we achieved this and thought about this before. So again, it has to be, I mean, design thinking is all about finding a solution to a problem, and that's why it's trending all over the world. But then we need to define the problem a bit beforehand and think what could be the solution to actually achieve this problem through these practices that we can see all over.
Right, and now from the, like, this is exactly what the question was about when we asked our audience, and still you can join and give your answer as well. What stands in the way of establishing circular design in Lebanon? And it is basically that we're busy with other priorities, lack of awareness and education, and of course the legislations and power policies and others. Karim, I wondered if you could also talk, I promise this is not a complicated question, but if you could talk to the kind of leadership you think is required in our country to generate a concern around sustainability, whether in architecture or construction, or like, for example, for those of us who live in a democratic country, how can we bring such goals to fruition before reaching a crisis point where we have to implement solutions in a fast way? Because I know for sure that it starts with leadership, because this is where the policies are generated and the legislations are issued.
I mean, in a way, we already answered the question in many ways, like voting is what will create the leadership. This is the bottom line, not only in Lebanon, but around the world. Finding the right people that have the necessary knowledge and putting them in power so that there would be legislations that would force certain things to happen and certain things not to happen. If you make the extraction of gas in Lebanon illegal, you will be forced to do something else. It's funny that at a time where the planet is getting warmer, the rush is at extracting fossil fuels. It's bizarre. While it is possible to put this money on research and development into alternative technologies. Even nuclear, which is less polluting than fossil fuels, is not given the priority. In Germany, they closed all the nuclear power plants because they're afraid it will explode. I mean, it explodes sometimes, it's true, out of human mistakes. If you pay attention, it won't explode, and it will emanate water vapor, you know? From the nuclear reactor, you get water vapor. You don't get CO2, which means that you don't warm the planet from a nuclear reactor. It's very weird. I mean, the human beings are very weird.
Okay.
What to tell you?
So, Sara, if you could tell us more about, like, we talked a bit about globalization and what countries can do, what leaders can do, but on an individual level, like for each one of us here in the room, are there certain things that we could do on a day-to-day level to impact sustainability in Lebanon as individuals?
It's a question to the audience. I think everyone has ideas on what we can do.
If anyone would like to share their ideas as well, you're welcome.
And yeah. But then at the end, I mean, of course, I mean, there's, again, I mean, we as designers have to take the lead in creating, changing spaces that change the behavior of people, of course, and art that can change the behavior of people, and elements and products that can help people actually achieve what we want as a planet actually to achieve in creating a better environment and a better planet. But at the end, it comes down to every single person. So we do work on different levels. We work on the policies and guidelines from the governments. We do work in our profession. We do work on communities. But individuals need to also take those values and actually try to see what they can do. Now, what we can help them with is to make them attractive, to make them interesting, to make them a solution to a problem, to come and think of innovative solutions that could actually cater for their own needs. But at the end, of course, we need to be able to reach those individuals. And to do that, we need to collaborate better together. We cannot be sitting in our silo as designers, and in our silo as policymakers, and in our silo as professionals that are from engineering or from wherever, and then business people that are actually looking at opportunities for profit. We need to come together. We need to think together. So how can we work with local municipalities as well? How can we work to make sure that we provide a solution that can address the different issues that are there, and at the same time be a solution we're proud of as designers, who's not just like there and we're not happy about. And we do have a responsibility in thinking a bit forward in this and thinking a bit more global also as designers, because we can, to take the lead and to make sure that others can become, actually through us, we facilitate the network of people together.
Yeah, and if you think there are, for example, if you want to pick 3 things that Lebanon must take up, like the most urgent things that we can pick up, if you have something in mind, it's like a plan of action, like we need to start with this, and the second thing and the third thing, what would it be? When it comes to sustainability, of course.
Produce electricity responsibly.
Okay, that's one. And
make people aware of the topic of
awareness
sustainability and how
education.
they can individually contribute to it.
Yeah, so awareness and education and making electricity.
It might not sound as a priority, but it's more of the cultural and historical preservation of what's going on. Be it in terms of not only archiving as in this safeguarding of things, but the sustainability of what we have at the moment, what has been done to be given to the future generations.
Right, and I would also like to add to that design thinking and systems thinking in the government. If perhaps we could have more representation when it comes to government practices, because like as for design for communities, there can be a lot of work that can be done if we have, let's say, one designer who shares more about design thinking and systems thinking within government bodies. Karim, with regards to the population in Lebanon, you've already mentioned a bit about this versus the land ratio. It is a big challenge for us, but how can we deal with it, with the way things are now? Knowing that we are a very small country, but we're over, like the population is too much.
That Lebanon is very dense. I mean, depends where. Not everywhere is Lebanon very dense. There is huge inequalities in Lebanon for sure. I mean, Lebanon is made out of several countries together. In many ways, you go to the Bekaa, it's another world. You go to the south, it's another world. Beirut in itself is worlds. I think we need to look at the environment itself, and building up on Philippa's point. The beauty of Lebanon comes from its initial geography. I mean, we have a wonderful geography initially. Right now, the shore is there are very few places in the shore which are natural, which are still natural. You go again to Portugal, it is illegal to put anything 500 meters into the shore. You cannot put anything 500 meters. And then after the 500 meters, there's a very stringent law on what you can do. And so when you walk south of Lisbon, you see kilometers of untouched shore. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think, again, it's a question of implementing very stringent legislation so that we don't continue destroying the environment, and so that we can keep some of this beautiful environment for the coming generations. I don't think really that the issue of overpopulation is really an issue. I would say it's a global issue, of course. The planet is overpopulated, and people should be conscious of bringing one more child whenever they decide to do so. Also, although many are still doing it very unconsciously, and not doing it actually would be a very smart thing to do. But I mean, of the people who are alive right now in Lebanon, I think it's very manageable if we come up with the proper policies.
Right. Knowing that both yourself and Sara are educators and teachers, what do you think is the importance of having hands-on learning experience to bridge kind of the gap between the academic and the professional world?
Well, it's very important because we cannot learn by just reading books. You cannot learn to swim with reading books. You cannot build without actually building. So to get connected to the materials, to actually get connected to the people for which we design, to be able to actually understand what we're doing, we need to actually get our hands dirty in doing the work, and that's very important in the sense as well, because for us, I mean, we're people that like to sense things. We see, we hear, but we also feel. And to be able to connect those senses to us and then really understand what we're doing, we need to be able to learn by doing. And what we do through hands-on architecture is that people are invested in actually learning about the communities, about sitting with the communities and talking to them, about really understanding who they're actually designing for and how they can actually bridge the gap also between people that are from different backgrounds, different stakeholders, from different authorities, whether it's a local authority like a municipality and the beneficiary of a program, or an NGO, or a client, or whoever. We need to be able to bring those people together. So that's the first part of hands-on experience, is to really understand who we're talking to and sit with them and have a participative approach through that. The other part is to actually build and do the projects ourselves, because then when we do that, we experience, I mean, we try a structure, we see if it works. If it doesn't work, then we do something else. And our field, and even graphic design and architecture, are very much related to actually doing models and testing materials, which is exactly coming back to the design thinking that businesses are implementing today by building prototypes out of actually solutions that are not tested. For us, we do test, we do build, because we want to see if it works or not. And then we get connected to the materials, we get connected to what we're doing, and we see how people actually use it. And then we develop also an evaluation on that. And that's the part where everyone involved in hands-on architecture or design would actually understand exactly, so what's the impact? So what's the evaluation? How can I evaluate this space afterwards? Can I see it? Can I actually relate to it? Does it function? Does it not? And that's where they see their own impact in creating a project that is for society. And they see that they've actually contributed to be civically engaged in a country which is crumbling, for example, through a project which is exactly helping them learn their professional skills to become architects. And that's where we can actually push people to, again, learn about the values and live by them afterwards in their lives.
Right. Does anyone in the audience have a question for our panelists? Okay.
Yes, they do.
You can raise your hand if you have a question. Okay, so we added a new question on Slido for those of you who are watching on the live YouTube web stream, and also here. So the question is: has cultural colonialism benefited your design or art practice? So some of you have answered somehow, and 33% answered yes, and no 17%. If someone answered somehow and is here with us in the audience, could you share with us your point of view, if possible? Did anyone in the audience here share answer by somehow?
I think there's a problem in your question.
Tell me, Karim.
Because it's not cultural colonialism which has benefited, because something that is negative cannot benefit. But
why do you think it's negative?
Because of the definition of how you defined it in the beginning. You said that it's a form of imposition of
that's the general
of one onto the other.
But
but cultural hybridity and mixity and the cross-pollinization of cultures across the world definitely is a source of wealth. Why should I reinvent the wheel if someone has already invented the wheel?
Exactly.
There's no point. I will use the wheel, and I will refine the wheel, because I have time and resources.
If you have access to the wheel, yeah.
If I have access to the wheel, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's it's assumed. It's assumed that you have access to the information. So I think we should look at it, yes, as an opportunity. This mixing is an opportunity to do better, for sure. But again, like we said earlier in the conversation, not to blindly take canons which do not apply. You know, if I come and say today the most sustainable way is to build with wood, I mean, wood is a renewable material. Of course, you can plant wood. You cannot plant stones. But there's no wood. So you cannot simply blindly take a canon. You need to evaluate it in the local context.
Right. Just to clarify, the definition we gave in the beginning was kind of a general definition of colonialism. Like if you ask anyone...
It's a provocation.
Yes. So if you ask anyone, like in the public, outside of the hall here, maybe not designers, like what is colonialism, they might start defining it like this. But then once you add the level of culture to it and sustainability, it will shift and turn to something that people might start thinking that, oh, yes, thank God we have these things and we're able to use them. It's, for me as a designer as well, as a visual designer, it has given me a tremendous amount of flexibility to be able to design with many languages, not only English and English and Arabic, but also French. And even one time I received a document in Chinese that I had to like adapt the design to Chinese. And you know, because once clients see you as someone who is flexible in designing with many languages, they will assume that an added language can also work in terms of design. So
to comment on this,
yeah,
I taught in Chinese in Italy.
Okay.
I'm not
Can
kidding.
you tell us how?
I'm not kidding. Yeah.
How did this happen?
I did a WhatsApp group with my students. Many of them were Chinese, and they were not understanding very well the English. So basically, anything I would say, I would copy paste it in English in the WhatsApp group. Then I would Google translate it to Chinese. Then I would send it in Chinese, and it worked.
Great. Thanks to Google Translate then. Okay. So the poll is up now. Now the results are equal. So I can't ask anyone to share their thoughts. Okay. So moving on to the topic of sustainability and economy. Often the two are placed opposite to each other. Do you think that sustainability and economy are against each other? And if we want to really transform businesses, how can we relook at sustainability and economy as friends and not as enemies? Philippa, if you'd like to.
I think that we should stop looking at things as very separate fields and entities. Economy, design, sustainability, and even culture are very much interlinked. So at any point we try to think within a particular path, we're also imposing a way of thinking in other fields. So if we are producing anything, we're also looking at the economy, we're also looking at culture, but we're also looking at how this can what this means to sustainability.
Yes, Sara. Karim.
Sustainability and greed are enemies of each other, for sure. Sustainability and capital accumulation for the sake of capital accumulation are certainly opposites. Sustainability should rhyme, obviously, with efficiency. It should rhyme, obviously, with a certain economy of means. Like, why should I use more material if it's not needed? But I think, on the other hand, sustainability and good business should be friends, of course. This is how life goes.
So how do you define a successful business in that light?
Interesting question. I would say that you need to include more things to be able to call it successful. If you say successful simply by a balance sheet, by how much turnover you are doing, it's a very exclusive type of thinking. A more inclusive type of thinking would be, what type of happiness, how many smiles is your business producing, how much well-being, how much quality. Like if we start to include more feminine aspects of success, then yes, that would be a
What do you mean
business.
by including feminine aspects? Well-being,
the ones that I was just saying, like well-being, beauty, happiness, positive emotions, creating a situation in which people are simply more happily living.
So do you mean the opposite is masculine?
Masculinity. Well, I mean, of course, masculinity is obsessed with efficiency and obsessed with the bottom lines of how much profit are you doing?
Yes, okay.
Yeah, of course.
Sara?
I would frame it into qualitative and quantitative, but okay. Yeah. No, I mean, the quality is also very important to address when we look at profitability as well. It's not just the quantity, but it's also the quality. And the other thing that might seem contradicting between sustainability is the long-term or short-term thinking, and that's where we need to think of economy also on the long term, because you don't evaluate if you're going to be doing profits only for 1 year. You want to see it over 10 years, and sustainability comes in a way where you can see actually that you can achieve better the 10-year goal in terms of profitability if you take sustainability into consideration. If you look for next year, I mean, of course, on the short term, maybe profit might not be aligned with sustainability.
Yes, Philippa.
I just wanted to add that maybe it would be more interesting to stop thinking about things as businesses, but rather as means of this sustainability within this economic system. So it's not about the production and this, I mean, creating this dynamic of producing, selling, and buying, and so on, but more of thinking of the profit. And so by thinking of sustainability is to think of this economic duration that goes on.
And do you think this is possible in a continuously colonized country? In a continuously colonized country, is it possible to implement sustainable design for a long time?
Do you mean in the case of Lebanon?
Yes,
Because
perhaps.
Because I mean, throughout the conversation, we've discussed how I still believe that at this point it's not about just being colonized or not. It's part of a more complex global and universal dynamic, which positions us in a place against many other things, but also with other things. And so it's not impossible. It's just about of how critical and how complex we push things to be.
So instead of resisting, perhaps just going with how the globalization flow is going and making use of this, instead of labeling things as like negatively or not.
Yeah, no, it's not about identifying whether we are colonized or not colonized, or whether colonization is bad or good.
It's what's needed.
It's more of understanding the nature of the space we are in, what it gives, but also what it needs. And this is back and forth between the people, so be it the citizens, the residents, the neighborhood, and so on.
It's about seeing it as a priority. Do we want to be sustainable? If we want, there's so many ways we can do that. But you just need to agree that this is something we want to do. And that's an advocacy kind of campaign that we need to take as designers and take it into what we do. Because that's going to start the flow and let people really start thinking about sustainability as, again, not something that is a compromising tool, but rather a goal that can actually better our lives.
Right, and not wait for the last minute to do it in a somehow, like the way we've been probably operating is for the past years maybe is perhaps in a desperate way, because whenever something wrong happens, we rush to find its quick solution instead of, quick fix, instead of working on things ahead of time and thinking of the long-term economy, as you were mentioning, Sara. We just implement solutions in a quick way, and then something else happens and we patch this up again, and that's how it's been happening. So we've almost reached the end of our talk, but I'd like to ask Karim one more question. after the pandemic, like in the post-pandemic time that we're in now, there's a lot of talk about a low-carbon future when it comes to architecture, and investing in infrastructure that supports, for example, walking or cycling, as well as green energy. And we know how limited the spaces in Lebanon are when it comes to cycling or walking, and how much we use our cars, maybe not as much as before now due to the fuel prices. But what do you think designers or architects need to be equipped with to create such a sustainable post-pandemic future for us in Lebanon?
Very important question, of course. The issue of public space in Lebanon, the continuity of public space, and the discontinuity of the sidewalk, the non-existence of biking lanes, and the constant appropriation of streets, sidewalks, and everything in a very chaotic way. We need laws, at the risk of repeating myself, that require the production of continuous public domains. It is shocking, to arrive to Gemaizeh or any street and suddenly you are attacked from all directions. Even when you are driving, you are attacked. Not only as a pedestrian. This is the result of chaos. Simply we live in a chaotic country where everything is left out to chance, and automatically the consequences of that. We should have legal requirements for the production of continuous public spaces. We have all the necessary people to be able to design the most wonderful public domains. There's no problem in terms of the human dimension. It's just that it needs to be implemented at a high level and required at a high level, and then it will trickle down. It's happened in so many countries around the world. I was again in Italy teaching, and we were doing a workshop about that, about how to make a certain road more pedestrian friendly. The solutions are there. It's not a question of creativity. The examples are there. It's not a question of precedent. All is there. We need the willingness and the laws, and by all means, what you are mentioning is very important, and it will make the experience of walking in Beirut or in any city or suburb in Lebanon a much more comforting experience. And you can walk your child, you can walk your dog, you can walk with your friends without any risk. It's certainly not the case right now.
Yes, and just before closing, how much do you think it's essential for creatives and designers to keep on networking and working in collaboration with others in the region and in overseas without being closed in on our community only in Lebanon? I know it's very important, but like in your experience, how important is it to work collectively?
It's, as you said, the priority is to actually collaborate with people, not to think of working and producing as an individual matter. But also the idea of thinking regionally and also globally is a way of breaking from this dichotomy of where we stand within this world. And it's also a way of producing knowledge, but also many other things which are necessary for the preservation of our daily life. And so it's a back and forth collaboration that takes place between, it's not an imposition of culture, but rather it's a way of receiving and sending ideas which are contextualized each, but also important for us to understand the nature of each space.
And if I add to this as well, Lebanon is multicultural, as we've established, and everyone knows. We are already skilled at communicating and coordinating with others, and we should actually be able to do that with the whole world. And at the same time, we shouldn't look only to the outside and not look inside as well. So we need to be able to actually bridge those links but also not think again, and I really encourage designers not to think only in terms of design, but really to connect to other people that are actually part of the design process, whether it's people that are going to use them or people that are going to manage them or operate them or actually provide program in it or whatever. But we really need to design things that are actually relevant for all the stakeholders together, so that they can be actually sustainable in their use in the future and not become irrelevant the day this project is not anymore fulfilling its objectives.
Yeah, and do you have like an idea about the term remnant design? When I say remnant design, what do you think of? Because our topic today has been about cultural colonialism and sustainability in that respect, but also remnant design. Does it ring, like, do you have a visual in your mind when you hear the words remnant design? What does it mean to you? Remnant.
Like the leftovers?
Exactly.
Of our design.
Yeah.
So whatever we do and the leftovers or the impact that we didn't actually think of, that stayed and impacted negatively. I mean, if I think of remnant, I don't think of positive, but maybe it's
the remaining.
The remaining. I mean, it's kind of what's there, what we didn't use, what we left and didn't think that it would actually have a consequence on the rest.
Or perhaps maybe whatever materials we have and remained to our use, what we're doing with that. So maybe this is another way of looking at it. Any last thoughts or wishes that you'd like to share before we close the talk? Karim.
Thank you so much.
So we'd like to also invite you after this talk to the exhibition, which is happening till 11, I think, tonight. It involves artists and designers from Lebanon, Iraq, and Jordan. And I'd like to thank all the people who watched the live stream with us and who shared their responses on Slido. You can still share your responses now. Yeah, and apparently we have a few questions on Slido, so let's check them. We have many questions on Slido, so it's a good time now to go through them. These are questions for our panelists. The first question is sustainability. Is it a trend versus an impact?
Next question.
It's complicated for you. Maybe, yeah, okay. So the next question is, how can cultural acts have a sustainable impact besides reusing spaces, integrating potential reusable material in creation of art? So how can cultural acts have a sustainable impact?
I think the question would be how are we defining impact then? Because anything that we do produce, so I mean sustainability is an impact in itself. And so doing all of these fields that are mentioned within this question are a way of being sustainable. But yeah, then how are we thinking of impact?
Yes. Would you like to add?
Again, I mean, we can summarize. It could be environmental, but it's certainly, I would say, it's a human, spiritual question. Like if the cultural product is producing this raising of awareness, then I think it is contributing to more people sharing those values and therefore spreading towards a more sustainable future.
Right.
If I may add as well, I mean, cultural acts are based again on what people felt was a need to do, and that's why, by definition, they are sustainable. Yes, exactly. So they can they don't need to transform as long as it's cultural and it's being done. Then there's a reason for that. I mean, if it has a negative impact on the environment when it's happening, then there's a way to think. So how can we still achieve this objective with a different environment we're in, or how can we still, I don't know, have houses maybe in the mountains without destroying all the trees that are there. I mean, there's ways to think about this, of course, but at the end, we need to think, so if people are doing this, then there's a reason, and this reason is based on a need that they have. So how can we actually still make them live in the way they want, or do whatever they're doing, but at the same time, taking into considerations the balances with the environment and the society.
And the next question is a question or a sharing. For me, the procedures are no longer sustainable anymore. First, due to globalization. Secondly, due to not relying on the material that's surrounding us to create. Thanks for sharing. The next question. So the design awareness gap shows the difference between end user expectations of services and products, what the companies and universities think they are offering. I'm not sure if that's clear. So the design awareness gap shows the difference between end user expectations of services and products. What are the companies and what the companies and universities think they are offering? It's not very clear. The question. Is it from someone in the audience? Here, I think it's from someone online.
I mean, we talked about how we can bridge the gap actually
exactly.
between education and the professional world.
Yes. So the latest question. Yeah, I think these are the questions. We've gone through them. 4 questions. Does anyone in the audience have another question for our panelists? No. Do you have anything else to share before closing? Great. Thank you so much for joining us for today's panel. We are really glad. But before closing, the director of Gothe Institut in Lebanon, Anne Bernhardt, would like to share a closing message. No? Ali, would you like to? Ali would like to share something. So Ali is the co-founder of DCDI, where this talk is being live streamed on the YouTube, the Diwan of Culture, Design and Innovation. Ali AbuAwad, let's welcome him on stage.
Test. Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming to SilSal. I would like to thank all of the listeners. I would like to thank the panelists for showing a different perspective on what is cultural sustainability, what is sustainability itself, what is colonialism. I know we have different opinions about this, and I'm sure we would agree on different points and disagree on different points, and that is the whole idea behind this discussion. I would like to thank the Gothe Institute. I would like to thank FANTASMEEM and Diwan, and especially you for coming to SilSal. I hope you enjoyed the whole program. I hope you are enjoying the exhibition, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Thank you, Hanan.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you really for joining us. I'd like to thank Philippa, Sara, and Karim for joining us also today. And make sure to pass by the exhibition. It's open till 11.
No, it's open till 9:30. And
till
we're going to be
9:30.
clearing it by 10.
So
don't stay late.
So you have 30 minutes to an hour. You can rush and check it. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.